It was one of those evenings where everything felt heavy. Daniel had been working 12-hour days for the past 2 weeks and his body was screaming for rest. He worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, and they were in the middle of their biggest project of the year. Every muscle in his body ached as he climbed the stairs to his apartment on the 3rd floor. The elevator had been broken for days, which was typical for this old building. The apartment building wasn't fancy. It was one of those places built in the 70s where every floor looked exactly the same, and every door was painted the same shade of boring beige. But it was affordable, and Daniel had lived there for almost 3 years now. He knew most of his neighbors by sight, even if he didn't know all their names. It was that kind of place where people smiled and nodded in the hallways but mostly kept to themselves. Daniel pushed open his apartment door and immediately kicked off his shoes. His feet were killing him. He'd been standing in meetings all day, presenting designs to clients who couldn't make up their minds about anything. The exhaustion wasn't just physical anymore. It was mental too. He was tired of thinking, tired of talking, tired of everything. He dropped his bag on the couch and headed straight for the bathroom. A hot shower was the only thing on his mind. As the water ran over his shoulders, he felt some of the tension start to melt away. He stood there longer than usual, just letting the warmth work its magic. When he finally stepped out, he barely had the energy to dry himself off properly. Daniel pulled on a pair of old shorts and that was it. He couldn't be bothered with anything else. His original plan had been to make some dinner, maybe watch a show, but his bed looked so inviting. Just 5 minutes, he thought. I'll just lie down for 5 minutes and then get up and eat something. The moment his head hit the pillow, he knew he was done for. His eyes closed almost automatically. The bedroom lamp was still on, casting a soft yellow glow across the room. He should have turned it off, but moving felt impossible. Within seconds, Daniel was completely knocked out. The kind of deep sleep where the world just disappears and nothing else matters. He had no idea how long he'd been asleep when something pulled him back to consciousness. It wasn't a sudden wake-up. It was more like swimming up from the bottom of a dark pool. There was a sound. His foggy brain tried to make sense of it. Was that his door? The bedroom door? Daniel's eyes opened slowly, still heavy with sleep. Everything felt dreamlike and fuzzy. The lamp was still on, which confused him even more. Had he been asleep for minutes or hours? He couldn't tell. Then he saw a movement. Someone was in his room. His heart jumped, but his body stayed frozen. He wasn't fully awake yet, and part of his brain was still trying to convince him this was a dream. But it wasn't. There was definitely someone there, a woman. She was standing near his dresser, and she was taking off her jacket. Daniel's mind started racing, trying to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. Who was this? What was happening? He wanted to sit up to say something, but shock kept him still. The woman draped her jacket over the chair in the corner. The same chair where he usually threw his own clothes at the end of the day. She moved with such casual confidence, like this was the most normal thing in the world. She wasn't hurried or nervous. She wasn't looking around suspiciously or checking over her shoulder. She just continued getting ready for bed as if she did this every single night. Daniel recognized her. Sort of. He'd seen her in the building before. They'd passed each other in the hallway a few times, maybe shared the elevator once or twice. She lived somewhere in the building, he was pretty sure, but he didn't know her name. They'd never actually spoken. She was just one of those familiar strangers you see in your everyday life. She pulled her sweater over her head and folded it neatly before placing it on top of her jacket. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. This was really happening. This wasn't a dream. A complete stranger was undressing in his bedroom, and he had no idea what to do about it. His mind was screaming at him to say something, to move, to react in some way. But fear had him pinned to the mattress. What if she had a weapon? What if she was dangerous? What if this was some kind of elaborate setup? His thoughts spiraled in a dozen different directions, none of them making any sense. The woman moved to the side of the bed. His bed. She pulled back the covers on the other side and slipped underneath them. Daniel could feel his heart pounding so hard he thought it might actually burst out of his chest. She settled into the pillow lying on her side with her back to him, and let out a long, tired sigh, the kind of sigh someone makes when they finally get to rest after a long day. Daniel lay there in complete shock, staring at the back of her head. She had dark hair that fell across the pillow. He could see her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. She seemed to be getting comfortable, shifting slightly to find the right position, and then she went still. Minutes passed. Daniel didn't move a muscle. He barely breathed. His mind was spinning with questions. Should he get up and leave? Should he call the police? Should he say something? What if she woke up and panicked? What if she screamed? The neighbors would definitely hear that. And then how would he explain this situation? He glanced at his phone on the nightstand. It was so close, but reaching for it felt dangerous. Any movement might wake her up, and he had no idea how she would react. He'd heard stories about people who were on drugs or having some kind of mental health crisis. They could be unpredictable, sometimes violent. He didn't want to take any chances. The logical part of his brain kept trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe she knew him somehow? Maybe they'd met before and he'd forgotten? But no, that didn't make sense. If they knew each other, she would have said something when she walked in. She would have at least looked at him or acknowledged his presence. Daniel thought about his door. Had he locked it? He always locked it. Well, almost always. Today had been so exhausting and he'd been in such a rush to get in the shower. Had he forgotten? The thought made his stomach sink. If he'd left the door unlocked, that explained how she got in. But it didn't explain why she thought this was her apartment. Time moved strangely. Each second felt like an hour, but somehow 10 minutes had passed. Maybe 15. Daniel couldn't tell anymore. His entire body was tense, every nerve on high alert. The woman beside him hadn't moved. She seemed to be sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that anything was wrong. What was he going to do? He couldn't lie here all night. Eventually, he would have to do something. But what? The weight of the situation pressed down on him, and he realized this was probably the strangest and most terrifying thing that had ever happened to him, and he still had no idea how it was going to end. Daniel's mind wouldn't stop racing. He'd been lying there, frozen in fear for what felt like forever. Every possible scenario played out in his head, each one worse than the last. What if she woke up and thought he'd done something to her? What if she started screaming? The walls in this building were thin. Everyone would hear.
How could he possibly explain this?
He stared at the ceiling, trying to control his breathing. His body wanted to either run or fight, but he was doing neither. Just lying there like a statue. The woman next to him shifted slightly, and Daniel's entire body tensed up even more. But she just adjusted her position and went still again. Her breathing was deep and steady. She was definitely asleep. Part of him wondered if he should just quietly slip out of bed and leave. He could go sleep on the couch and deal with this in the morning. But what if she woke up in the middle of the night and wandered around his apartment? What if she went into his kitchen or worse, left the door wide open? He couldn't just abandon his own home to a stranger. Another few minutes crawled by. Daniel's exhaustion was fighting with his adrenaline. His body was so tired, but his mind was wide awake, alert to every tiny sound and movement. He wondered what time it was. Had to be close to midnight by now, maybe later. The building was quiet except for the usual creaks and groans old buildings make. Then something changed. The woman moved again, but this time it was different. Her breathing pattern shifted. She was waking up. Daniel's heart started hammering again. This was it. Whatever was going to happen was about to happen. The woman's hand moved slowly across the bed, touching the sheets. She seemed to be feeling the fabric, running her fingers over it. Then she went still for a moment. Daniel could almost feel the confusion radiating from her. Something wasn't right, and she was starting to realize it. She sat up slowly, and Daniel could see her looking around the room. Even in the dim light from the lamp, he could see her expression changing. Confusion turned into concern. She looked at the walls, the furniture, the window. Her head turned slowly, taking in every detail. And then she froze completely. She'd seen him. For a second, nobody moved. They just stared at each other in complete shock. Daniel could see her eyes go wide, her mouth opening slightly. Then she scrambled backward so fast she nearly fell off the bed. She grabbed the sheets and pulled them up, her voice coming out in a strangled gasp. "Who are you? What are you doing in my bed?" Daniel sat up too, raising his hands like someone had pointed a weapon at him. "Your bed? This is my apartment! Who are you?" They both spoke at once, voices rising in panic and confusion. The woman looked around the room again, her face going from angry to horrified in seconds. She kept looking at things, really looking now. The furniture, the pictures on the wall, the clothes on the chair. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no." Daniel watched as the realization hit her like a truck. Her face went pale. She put her hand over her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. She looked absolutely terrified. "This isn't my apartment," she said, her voice shaking. "This isn't my apartment. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought. I was sure." Daniel's fear started to ease just a tiny bit. She was as scared as he was. This wasn't some kind of attack or setup. This was a mistake. A really, really big mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. "You live in this building?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was still racing. She nodded quickly, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "Upstairs. I live upstairs. 4th floor. Right above you, I think. The apartments are all the same. I was so tired. I'd been at my friend's place and She stopped, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Daniel could see her whole body shaking. She was crying now, completely mortified by what had happened. He felt his own panic starting to fade, replaced by an awkward mixture of relief and sympathy. This woman wasn't dangerous. She was just someone who'd made a terrible mistake. "It's okay," he said, though it definitely wasn't okay. Not really. Just take a breath." She grabbed her clothes from the chair, clutching them to her chest. "I need to leave. I need to go. I'm so sorry. Please don't call the police. I wasn't trying to. I would never. I just thought it was my apartment. How did you get in?" Daniel asked. She looked at the door. It wasn't locked. It just opened. "My apartment is exactly the same. Same layout, same door color, everything. I wasn't thinking. I'd had some wine at the party and I was exhausted. I work night shifts at the hospital and my sleep schedule is completely messed up. I haven't slept properly in days. That explains some things." Daniel remembered now that he probably hadn't locked the deadbolt. He usually did, but tonight he'd been so tired. One simple mistake and look where it led. "I'm a nurse," she continued, as if that somehow made everything make more sense. "I just finished a double shift yesterday and I was at my friend's apartment tonight trying to relax. I only had 2 glasses of wine, I swear. But I was so tired. And when I got to what I thought was my floor..." She trailed off, shaking her head. Daniel got out of bed slowly, carefully. He didn't want to make any sudden movements that might scare her more. "Look, it's okay. It was an honest mistake. Both of us messed up. I should have locked my door better." "That doesn't make this okay," she said, wiping her tears. "I broke into your home. I got into your bed. You must have been terrified." "I was pretty scared," Daniel admitted. "I didn't know what was happening." They stood there in the most awkward silence either of them had ever experienced. The woman kept apologizing, her voice breaking with embarrassment. Daniel kept trying to reassure her, even though he was still processing everything himself. This was absolutely the strangest night of his life, and he had no idea how to handle it. "Can I get dressed?" she asked quietly. "Then I'll leave. I promise I'll leave right away." Daniel nodded and turned around, facing the wall to give her privacy. He heard her moving quickly, pulling on her clothes. The whole situation was surreal. 20 minutes ago, he'd been terrified. Now he was standing in his own bedroom while a crying stranger got dressed behind him. Life was weird sometimes. "Okay," she said softly. "I'm dressed." Daniel turned around. She looked absolutely miserable. Her eyes red from crying, her face flushed with embarrassment. She wouldn't even look directly at him. "I'm Daniel, by the way," he said, not knowing what else to say. She finally looked up at him. "I'm Lisa, and I'm so sorry about all of this." Daniel stepped out of his bedroom to give Lisa some space. His mind was still trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. He walked to the kitchen, running his hand through his hair, and grabbed a glass from the cabinet. His hands were shaking slightly as he filled it with water. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him feeling shaky and strange. Lisa emerged from the bedroom a moment later, fully dressed and looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her eyes were still red, and she kept wringing her hands together nervously. She stopped in the living room doorway, maintaining distance between them. "I should go," she said quietly. "Wait," Daniel said, surprising himself. "Just sit down for a minute, please." She looked uncertain, but after a moment she moved to the couch and sat on the very edge of it, like she might need to run at any second. Daniel brought her the glass of water and sat down in the chair across from her. They needed to talk about what had just happened. Running away wouldn't change anything. "Drink some water," he said gently. "You're shaking." Lisa took the glass with trembling hands and sipped it slowly. She wouldn't look at him. The embarrassment was radiating off her in waves. "I know you want to leave," Daniel said, "but I think we should talk about this, just for a few minutes." She nodded slightly, but still didn't meet his eyes. "Tell me what happened tonight, from your perspective." Lisa took a deep breath and set the water glass down. "I work at City General Hospital. I'm a nurse in the emergency department. My schedule is crazy. Some nights I work until 3 in the morning. Other nights I start at 11. My body doesn't know if it's coming or going anymore. Today I finally had a day off and my friend invited me over. She lives in the building next door." Daniel listened, watching her gradually calm down as she talked. "We were just hanging out, watching movies, drinking some wine. Nothing crazy. I only had 2 glasses over 3 hours. But I was so exhausted. I've been running on maybe 4 hours of sleep for the past week. When I left her place around 11, I was like a zombie. I just wanted to get home and fall into bed." She paused, closing her eyes like she was reliving the mistake. "I came into the building, climbed the stairs because the elevator is broken. I wasn't really paying attention. I was on autopilot, you know. I walked down the hallway to what I thought was my door. The numbers all look the same in this dim lighting. I pulled out my keys, but then I noticed the door wasn't locked. It just pushed open. I forgot to lock the deadbolt," Daniel admitted. "I never forget, but tonight I was so tired." "I should have noticed something was wrong," Lisa continued. "But I didn't. I just walked in thinking I'd forgotten to lock my own door. The layout is identical to my apartment. Same kitchen on the left, same living room, same hallway to the bedroom. I didn't turn on any lights. I just went straight to the bedroom. And my lamp was on," Daniel said. "Right, but I sometimes leave my lamp on too. I didn't think anything of it. I just saw the bed and thought about sleep. I wasn't looking at the details. I wasn't looking at anything, really. I just wanted to sleep." She covered her face with her hands. "I can't believe I undressed. I can't believe I got into bed with you. What kind of person does that?" "A tired person who made an honest mistake," Daniel said. "Look, I'm not going to lie. When I first woke up and saw you, I was terrified. I thought you were going to hurt me or rob me or something. But once I understood what happened, I realized it could happen to anyone, especially in this building where everything looks the same." Lisa finally looked at him properly. "You're being really kind about this. Most people would be calling the police right now. What would that accomplish? You made a mistake. You didn't mean any harm. And honestly, I made a mistake too by not locking my door properly." They sat in silence for a moment. The situation was so bizarre that it almost felt unreal. Daniel glanced at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight now. This whole thing had lasted maybe half an hour, but it felt like hours. "What's your apartment number?" Daniel asked. 407, Lisa replied. "I'm in 307, right below you." "The apartments really are identical," she said. "Same door, same layout, same everything." "That's no excuse for what I did, but at least it makes sense how it happened." "Do you live alone?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "Yeah, moved in about 8 months ago. The rent is reasonable and it's close to the hospital. I work weird hours, so I don't really know many people in the building. I've seen you a few times in the hallway." "Same here," Daniel said. "I've been here almost 3 years, but I mostly keep to myself." Lisa picked up her water glass again and finished it. She seemed calmer now, though still clearly embarrassed. "I should probably give you my phone number. You know, in case you need to reach me about this, or if you want to press charges or something." "I'm not pressing charges," Daniel said firmly. "Nothing happened." "Well, something happened, but nothing bad happened. Let's just exchange numbers and try to move past this." They both pulled out their phones. Lisa's hands were steadier now as she typed in her number for him. Daniel did the same, sending her a quick text so she'd have his contact information. "Thank you for being so understanding," Lisa said. "Not many people would be." "We're neighbors," Daniel said with a slight smile. "Might as well try to handle this like adults." Lisa stood up and Daniel walked her to the door. The hallway outside was empty and quiet. All the other residents were probably asleep, completely unaware of the strange drama that had unfolded. "Let me walk you upstairs," Daniel offered, "just to make sure you get to the right apartment this time." Lisa looked like she might argue, but then nodded. They walked to the stairwell together, climbing up to the 4th floor in silence. When they reached her door, Lisa pulled out her keys and unlocked it properly this time. She pushed it open and turned back to Daniel. "I really am sorry," she said one more time. I know you are. Get some sleep, Lisa. You look like you need it, she managed a weak smile. You too. And thanks again for not freaking out. Daniel watched her go inside and close the door behind her. He heard the deadbolt click into place. Then he turned and headed back downstairs to his own apartment. When he got inside, he made sure to lock both locks this time. He checked them twice just to be sure. Back in his bedroom, Daniel looked at his bed. The covers were still messed up from where Lisa had been lying. The whole thing felt like a strange dream. He picked up his phone and looked at the new contact. Lisa, 407. Just a few hours ago, she'd been a complete stranger. Now she was someone he'd shared the weirdest experience of his life with. He got back into bed, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying everything, looking at it from different angles. By the time he finally drifted off, the first light of dawn was starting to creep through his window. Daniel woke up late the next morning with a pounding headache. For a moment, he lay there confused, trying to remember why he felt so exhausted. Then it all came flooding back. Lisa, the bedroom, the whole bizarre situation. He grabbed his phone and saw it was already past 10. He'd slept through his alarm, which never happened. His boss had texted asking if he was okay. He called in, explaining he wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. He felt drained, like he'd run a marathon in his sleep. After hanging up, he noticed a text from an unknown number that had come in an hour ago. Actually, not unknown. It was Lisa. I'm so sorry again about last night. I know I keep apologizing, but I can't stop thinking about how terrifying that must have been for you. If there's anything I can do to make this right, please let me know. I'd be happy to pay for new locks or anything else. Daniel sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. He typed back, "It's okay, really. No need for new locks. Just try to get some rest and don't worry about it." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for being so understanding. Seriously, you're a good person." That was the end of the conversation, but Daniel found himself thinking about it throughout the day. The whole situation had been terrifying, sure, but there was something almost funny about it now that it was over. Two people, both exhausted, both making simple mistakes that led to the most awkward moment imaginable. Over the next few days, things went back to normal. Daniel got caught up with work. His project deadlines were still looming, and he spent long hours at his computer designing and redesigning logos that clients kept changing their minds about. He'd almost forgotten about the whole incident when he ran into Lisa in the building's basement laundry room on Saturday morning. She was pulling clothes out of a dryer, folding them into a basket. When she looked up and saw him, her face immediately flushed red. "Oh, hi." "Hey," Daniel said, carrying his own basket of dirty clothes. "How are you?" "Good, fine, embarrassed, but fine." She attempted a smile. "You? Can't complain." "Well, I could, but you probably don't want to hear about work drama." They stood there for an awkward moment before Lisa suddenly laughed. It started as a small chuckle but grew into real laughter. "I'm sorry," she said, "but this is ridiculous. I'm standing here folding laundry and trying to act normal after I literally crawled into your bed last week. How do we just move past that?" Daniel found himself laughing too. "I have no idea. This is definitely new territory for me." "Same here. Trust me, this is not something I do regularly, or ever." She shook her head, still smiling. "I still can't believe it happened." "The look on your face when you realized it wasn't your apartment," Daniel said. "I almost felt bad for you, almost." "Almost." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Well, I was the one who woke up with a stranger in my bed. That deserves at least a little sympathy." They both laughed again, and suddenly the tension was gone. They were just two neighbors talking in a laundry room, sharing a joke about something ridiculous that had happened. Daniel loaded his clothes into the washer while Lisa finished folding hers. "So you work at City General?" Daniel asked, making conversation. "Yeah, emergency department. It's chaos most days, but I love it." "Well, love is a strong word. Let's say I tolerate it with occasional moments of satisfaction. I know that feeling. I do graphic design. Spend my days making logos for people who can't decide what they want. Sounds frustrating. It has its moments." Daniel poured detergent into the machine. "But at least I'm not dealing with actual emergencies like you." They talked while their laundry machines ran. Lisa told him about a particularly crazy night in the ER where they'd treated everything from a broken arm to a guy who'd swallowed his wedding ring on a dare. Daniel shared stories about impossible clients and last-minute deadline changes. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like they'd known each other for years instead of days. "You want to grab coffee sometime?" Daniel found himself asking. I mean, we're neighbors. Might as well be friendly. Lisa looked surprised but pleased. Yeah, actually. That would be nice. I don't really know anyone in this building. They exchanged schedules and decided on Tuesday afternoon. Lisa had a rare day off and Daniel could work from home and take a break. They parted ways with genuine smiles, both feeling like maybe something good could come from that strange night after all. Tuesday came, and they met at a small cafe 3 blocks from their building. It was one of those cozy places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. They ordered coffee and found a table by the window. So, Lisa said, wrapping her hands around her mug, do we just never mention the incident again, or do we joke about it forever? Probably somewhere in between, Daniel said. But I'm leaning toward joking about it. It's too weird not to. Fair enough. She took a sip of her coffee. For what it's worth, that was literally the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. And I once called my professor Mom in college. Daniel laughed. That's pretty bad, but I think the bed thing tops it. They spent 2 hours at that cafe, talking about everything from their jobs to their families to their favorite movies. Daniel learned that Lisa had moved to the city for work, leaving behind a small town where everyone knew everyone. She missed the quiet sometimes, but loved the opportunities here. Lisa learned that Daniel had been through a rough divorce 2 years ago and was still figuring out how to trust people again. That must have been hard, Lisa said sympathetically. It was. Still is sometimes, but I'm working on it. As they walked back to the building together, Daniel realized he'd had more fun in those 2 hours than he'd had in months. There was something easy about talking to Lisa. Maybe it was because they'd already been through the most awkward situation possible together. What else could be worse than that? Over the next few weeks, they started spending more time together. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into watching movies at one of their apartments. They'd text throughout the day, sharing funny stories or complaining about work. Daniel found himself looking forward to seeing her, checking his phone more often to see if she'd messaged. Lisa seemed to feel the same way. She started stopping by his apartment after her shifts, still in her scrubs, too tired to cook. Daniel would order food and they'd eat together while she told him about her day. The hospital stories were fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. One evening, they were watching an old comedy in Daniel's living room. They'd both seen it before, but it was one of those movies you could watch 100 times. Lisa was sitting on the couch next to him, close enough that their arms touched. During a funny scene, they both reached for the popcorn bowl at the same time, and their hands collided. They looked at each other, and suddenly the air felt different, charged. Daniel saw Lisa's expression change, saw her eyes drop to his lips for just a second. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, testing the waters. When they pulled apart, Lisa was smiling. Well, she said, that was unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Definitely good. They kissed again and Daniel felt something shift inside him. Something he hadn't felt since before his divorce. Hope. The possibility that maybe he could trust someone again. That maybe something beautiful could come from the strangest beginning imaginable. 3 months passed like a beautiful blur. Daniel and Lisa fell into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Their relationship grew steadily, built on laughter and honesty and a shared understanding of how strange life could be. They joked about their origin story, calling it the worst meet-cute ever, or that time Lisa broke into my apartment and my heart. Lisa's work schedule was still chaotic, but they made it work. Daniel would wake up early sometimes to have breakfast with her before her morning shifts. She'd come to his apartment after late nights, too exhausted to climb the extra floor to her own place. His apartment became their space, though technically they still lived separately. They learned each other's habits and quirks. Daniel discovered that Lisa sang off-key in the shower and couldn't cook to save her life, but made incredible sandwiches. Lisa learned that Daniel talked to himself when he was designing, muttering about color theory and composition. He was terrible at remembering to buy groceries but somehow always had ice cream in the freezer. They met each other's friends. Lisa introduced Daniel to her hospital colleagues at a dinner party, where he heard even more crazy ER stories. Daniel brought Lisa to a work event where she charmed his boss by listening patiently to a 20-minute explanation of rebranding strategy. They fit into each other's lives like puzzle pieces that had been cut specifically to match. But it wasn't all perfect. They had their rough patches. Lisa's schedule sometimes meant they'd go days without really seeing each other. Daniel's insecurities from his divorce would occasionally surface, making him worry that things were too good to last. They had arguments about small things that felt big in the moment. Communication breakdowns, misunderstandings, but they always talked it through. That was the difference. They'd both learned from past relationships that running away or shutting down didn't fix anything. So they stayed and worked through it even when it was uncomfortable. One night, about 6 months after the incident, they were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the building. Lisa was picking at her pasta, looking thoughtful. "What's on your mind?" Daniel asked. "My lease is up next month," she said. "I've been thinking about what to do." Daniel's heart skipped. "And? I don't know. I could renew it, or..." She looked at him carefully. "I could not. You could not," Daniel agreed, trying to keep his voice steady. "What would happen then?" "Well, I'd need to find somewhere else to live. Which seems silly since I basically live in your apartment already. I think I've slept in my own bed maybe 5 times in the past month." Daniel smiled. "That's true. You're pretty much a squatter at this point. Hey, I pay for half the food." "That's not squatting." They laughed, but the question hung in the air between them. This was big. Moving in together after 6 months felt fast, but it also felt right. They'd been through something most couples never experienced. They'd seen each other at their worst and most vulnerable right from the start. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. Lisa set down her fork and reached across the table to take his hand. "I want to stop pretending I live in apartment 407 when we both know I live in 307. With you." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Unless you're not. We can wait if you need more time." "I don't need more time. I want you there, officially, not just as someone who crashes after work." They grinned at each other like two people who'd just made the best decision of their lives. The couple at the next table smiled at them, probably assuming they'd just gotten engaged. In a way they had. They'd committed to building a life together, strange beginning and all. The day Lisa officially moved in was chaotic and perfect. She didn't have much furniture since most of her stuff was still back in her hometown, but she had boxes of books, clothes, and random items she'd collected over the years. Her friends from the hospital helped carry things down the stairs, making jokes about how she'd managed to find the laziest moving situation possible. "Only 1 floor down," her friend Kelly teased. "Must be nice." Daniel had spent the morning rearranging his closet and dresser to make room for Lisa's things. He'd even cleared out a whole shelf in the bathroom for her products, though he suspected she'd need more space than that. He was right. Her skincare routine alone took up half the cabinet. That evening, after all the boxes were unpacked and her friends had left, Daniel and Lisa collapsed onto the couch together. The apartment looked different now. More lived in. More like a home instead of just a place to sleep. "Remember when you first walked through that door?" Daniel said. "How could I forget? Worst moment of my life. Best moment of mine." Lisa turned to look at him. "Really?"